sending Doug Ford onto Fox News to show them that we're not messing around up here. And we're going to send Danielle next. Maybe we won't send Danielle. No, maybe we won't. We won't send Danielle. No, it's a bad idea. Forget. Strike that. Just ignore that back there.
Well, I've noticed this with progressive men and how much they talk about how much they support women until they meet a strong conservative woman. And so this is a pretty consistent type of approach that I've seen not only from the current Prime Minister, but the former one as well. And the attitude is sit down and shut up. Well, I don't shut up. I make sure that Albertans know exactly how I feel about issues. And I'm going to continue advocating on behalf of my province, whether he likes it or not.
Well, I think Albertans are hurt and betrayed. That's how I think Albertans are feeling. I think Canada as a whole got a sense of that feeling of hurt and betrayal with the way the Americans are treating us right now. But we've been treated that way for the last 10 years. Treated like we should be just shut up and just be satisfied with whatever the central government decides to do, regardless of whether it's constitutional or not. I think that's what you were seeing in this last election. And I think Albertans want to share my view that we want to be able to have Alberta sovereignty within a united Canada. But we also would like to see Team Canada be on Team Alberta for once. And so I, at the very beginning of the campaign, said whoever got elected, I would expect them to address the 9 offensive pieces of legislation and policy that prevent us from being able to exercise our constitutional jurisdiction to develop our resources. I've put that on the table. I know that the opposition leader said that they were very reasonable. Prime Minister Carney, it's a little unclear. He's given the impression, certainly with the interactions he's had with me and the Council of the Federation, that he is open to establishing economic corridors that include pipelines. And I have to believe that if you're intending to create more markets, build more pipelines, you will need to have oil and gas to fill them. So you cannot have policy that suppresses the development of resources at the same time as you're trying to expand the development of resources. So we'll have a very interesting conversation over the next 6 months. I don't want to prejudge the outcome, but that's what we'll be advocating for.
Alberta controls 1.8 trillion barrels of oil reserves, the third largest in the world. Yet yesterday, when Prime Minister Mark Carney tried to impose new export taxes on that resource, Premier Danielle Smith didn't just refuse, she had him physically removed from their meeting. This unprecedented ejection has constitutional experts scrambling, oil markets fluctuating, and Canadians choosing sides in what might become the most significant federal-provincial standoff since the 1995 Quebec referendum. The shocking details of what was said in that room before Smith's dramatic move are exactly what we're covering today. When global powers clash, Canada doesn't stand on the sidelines. We're pulled into the current, and the effects reach every corner of our economy and daily life. Canada Connect lays out the forces reshaping our world, showing how international tensions are already influencing the choices and challenges faced by real people here at home. We're glad you're here. Your support helps us keep examining the stories that too often go overlooked by the mainstream narrative. The breaking point: what triggered Smith's ejection of Carney? What could make a provincial leader throw out a sitting prime minister? The answer came down to a single piece of paper Carney slid across the table. The meeting started like any federal-provincial discussion until Carney dropped his bombshell, a draft policy imposing new oil export taxes, specifically targeting Alberta's energy sector. Smith didn't need to read past the first page to recognize this as another federal power grab. Here's how it went down. Sources inside the room say Smith cut Carney off mid-sentence when he started explaining the tax framework. She pointed right to Section 92A of the Constitution Act that gives provinces exclusive authority over natural resources. Constitutional lawyers confirmed it. The feds were overstepping again. The numbers told the real story though. That tax would have taken $3.2 billion straight out of Alberta's economy every single year. This wasn't some spontaneous outburst from Smith. Her team had wargamed this exact scenario. They came armed with legal opinions from 3 top constitutional scholars prepped to challenge federal overreach. Smith knows the playbook. Ottawa tries to squeeze Alberta. Alberta pushes back Ottawa. Look at what happened last year when federal climate policies already shaved 1.4% off Alberta's GDP growth. This time, she wasn't playing nice. The room got tense when Carney refused to withdraw the proposal. Multiple witnesses described Smith standing up suddenly, not raising her voice but speaking slow and clear. This meeting is over. Then came the moment no one expected. She pointed to the door, and security actually escorted the Prime Minister out. No Alberta Premier has ever kicked out a sitting PM before. But let's be clear, this wasn't just about one meeting going bad. It's about years of building resentment between Alberta and Ottawa. Every federal climate policy, every pipeline delay, every jobs report showing Alberta workers getting squeezed while Eastern politicians lecture them about transition. Smith's been waiting for this fight since she took office. Today, she finally threw the first punch. The crazy part? This might just be the opening round. Alberta's got new legal tools now with that Sovereignty Act Smith passed last year. She's basically created a constitutional escape hatch for when Ottawa overreaches. Legal experts are split down the middle. 52% say Alberta's position holds water in court, 48% think the feds will win. Doesn't matter what the courts say short term though. The political damage is already done. Smith wasn't just reacting in that moment. She sent a message to every energy worker in Alberta and every premier watching across the country. When Ottawa comes for your resources, you don't negotiate. You fight. Next move is Carney's, but Smith won this round decisively. Now we wait to see if other provinces join her or if she'll be standing alone when this reaches the Supreme Court. The Alberta government isn't releasing the full transcript yet, but insiders say there was one line from Smith that sums up her whole position. You don't get to tax what you didn't build. That's going to be on bumper stickers across the province by next week. Meanwhile, markets are jittery with oil futures up 3% on the uncertainty. Energy analysts say investors hate this kind of political instability, but Alberta workers seem to love it. Smith's approval rating spiked 11 points overnight. Now we're seeing what happens when a province decides it's done asking permission. Saskatchewan's premier already issued a statement backing Smith's move. Newfoundland might be next. That's how these things start. First one province pushes back, then others join. Carney thought he was walking into a routine policy meeting yesterday. Instead, he walked out with the biggest constitutional crisis of his premiership. Before we dive into the deeper stakes of Alberta's energy economy, we want to take a quick moment to thank you again for watching. Your support means everything to us. Whether you agree or disagree with the decisions being made, the fact that you're engaged, watching, thinking, questioning, is what truly matters. You're part of a growing community that refuses to look away when big decisions reshape our country. Alberta's energy economy. Why Smith won't back down. 165 billion recoverable barrels. That's what Danielle Smith is really fighting for in this showdown. Alberta's oil sands hold 97.4% of Canada's proven oil reserves, and that's why this confrontation goes deeper than political theater. When Smith had Carney escorted out of that meeting, she was defending the lifeblood of her province's economy. Oil and gas isn't just another industry in Alberta. It is the industry. The sector contributes 22% of Alberta's GDP and supports 1 out of every 5 jobs in the province. It's the difference between prosperity and collapse for whole towns built around energy work. Since 2020, federal environmental policies have already cost Alberta 34,000 energy jobs. That's 34,000 paychecks gone, 34,000 families scrambling. Smith knows these aren't just statistics, they're votes, and they're furious. Look at the markets. The US takes 96% of Alberta's crude oil exports. That's not just a business relationship, it's complete dependence. Any new tax on exports would hit that critical market first and hardest. Smith's team isn't speculating about potential damage either. They've got projections showing exactly how much an export tax would bleed from Alberta's economy every month, every year. Here's where it gets interesting. Polls show 68% of Albertans want stronger provincial control over energy policy. That number didn't come from nowhere. It's the result of years watching Ottawa make decisions that hurt Alberta's economy while other provinces benefit. Smith didn't create this resentment. She's just the first premier willing to act on it. The Alberta Sovereignty Act changes everything. Smith didn't just yell at Carney and hope for the best. She's got legal authority now to ignore federal policies her government believes hurt provincial interests. Constitutional scholars still argue about whether it'll hold up in court, but that's almost beside the point. The act gives Smith political cover to escalate this fight as far as she wants to take it. This isn't about abstract political principles for most Albertans. Drive through Fort McMurray or Red Deer and you'll see real people whose lives depend on the energy sector working. They're not thinking about constitutional law, they're thinking about mortgage payments and grocery bills. When Smith talks about defending Alberta's economy, she's talking about keeping these communities alive. The narrow legal question is about jurisdiction. The bigger issue is whether Alberta gets to control its own economic destiny. Other provinces are watching closely. Saskatchewan's already backing Alberta's play. Newfoundland could be next. Together, they represent Canada's entire oil-producing region. Smith isn't just resisting one tax proposal. She's testing whether provinces have any real power left in modern Canadian federalism. The numbers work in her favor. Over 300 active oil sands projects pumping billions into provincial coffers annually. That money funds schools, hospitals, roads. Ottawa wants more control over the resource while Alberta bears all the infrastructure and environmental costs. There's a reason this confrontation happened now. Carney's government faces re-election next year. Smith can count votes too. Every energy worker who's tired of being treated as Canada's piggy bank while other provinces critique how they earn their living. The export tax was the spark, but the fuel's been building for a decade. Legal experts worry about constitutional crisis. Economists warn about market uncertainty. Politicians debate jurisdictional lines. For Albertans, it's much simpler. Who gets to decide whether they have jobs next month? Smith's betting they'll choose her version of Alberta over Carney's vision of Canada every time. The Sovereignty Act just gave her better cards to play. Markets reacted immediately to the confrontation. Oil futures jumped 3% on the uncertainty. Smith's team expected that. They know Alberta's resources give them leverage Ottawa can't ignore. Every day this standoff continues costs someone money, and it's not just Alberta businesses feeling the pinch. The constitutional battle lines are clearly drawn now. Smith's message to Ottawa is simple. Alberta doesn't need permission to develop its own resources. The courts may decide the legal boundaries later, but politically, Smith just reset the entire federal-provincial relationship. Whether other premiers follow her lead depends on how hard Carney pushes back. One thing's certain, this fight won't stay confined to Alberta's borders for long. But what happens next could shake Canada's political foundations in ways we haven't seen in decades. Because Smith's confrontation wasn't just a dramatic political gesture, it may have just triggered a constitutional standoff that pulls other provinces into the fray. And trust us, what's coming next could change everything you thought you knew about federal power in Canada. Keep watching. This is where it gets explosive. Constitutional crisis, when provinces defy Ottawa. Legal experts are sounding the alarm that Smith's showdown with Carney could permanently change how Canada's federal-provincial system works. We're not talking about minor policy disagreements here. This confrontation tests fundamental constitutional boundaries in ways we haven't seen since Quebec's sovereignty battles. The courts have ruled on 14 previous cases where provinces pushed back against federal policies, but none involved a provincial leader physically ejecting the Prime Minister during negotiations. The Supreme Court's 2021 carbon tax decision set some important markers on federal jurisdiction. That ruling allowed the carbon tax, but made clear Ottawa couldn't just bulldoze provincial authority. Now Alberta's using that same logic to argue the export taxes crossed the line. Constitutional lawyers are split right down the middle. 52% say Alberta's position has merit. 48% think the feds will ultimately prevail. That division tells you everything about how unclear these legal boundaries really are. Other provinces aren't just watching, they're starting to pick sides. Saskatchewan wasted no time backing Alberta's play. Newfoundland signaled it might join too. History shows us what happens when provinces band together against Ottawa. Look at the 1980s energy fights, or the 1990s equalization battles. Every time multiple provinces unite against a federal policy, Ottawa usually blinks first. That's why Carney's team should be worried right now. This could snowball fast. The legal battle ahead won't be quick or clean. These constitutional cases typically take years to wind through the courts. In the meantime, uncertainty hangs over Canada's energy sector, over provincial budgets, over investment decisions. Companies planning projects in Alberta don't know which set of rules will apply when they're finally ready to drill. That economic limbo alone could cost billions before any court reaches a final decision. What makes this different from past federal-provincial fights is Alberta's new Sovereignty Act. Smith created a ready-made legal weapon for exactly this kind of confrontation. The act lets Alberta's legislature declare federal laws unconstitutional and refuse to enforce them, at least until courts say otherwise. Legally speaking, it's a bold move that flips the usual process on its head. Normally, provinces have to wait for courts to rule before resisting federal laws. Smith's approach says Alberta gets to decide first, then let courts sort it out later. The real question is how far other premiers will go to back Alberta. Saskatchewan's already in. BC might quietly support some aspects. Quebec will likely stay neutral, but watch carefully. They've got their own sovereignty playbook. If enough provinces signal support, Carney faces a much harder political choice. One province he can pressure. Half a dozen? That's a national unity crisis waiting to happen. Court challenges are inevitable regardless. The federal government can't let Alberta's Sovereignty Act stand unchallenged. It undermines the whole constitutional order, but litigation takes time. and in politics, time matters. Every month this drags on gives Smith more leverage. Every provincial election during this period becomes a referendum on federal overreach. The longer it lasts, the more Carney has to consider compromise. This isn't just about oil or taxes anymore. We're looking at the most serious challenge to Canada's federal structure since the 1982 Constitution Act. Provincial powers versus federal authority. Who gets final say over natural resources? Whether economic regions can veto national policies. These are foundational questions that go way beyond Danielle Smith or Mark Carney's political careers. Market reactions show how serious this is. Oil futures jumped 3% on the uncertainty. The Canadian dollar dipped. Investors hate not knowing which government's rules will apply. That economic instability could spread fast if this conflict escalates. We're already seeing energy companies put Alberta projects on hold until there's clarity. Jobs are on the line, pensions are on the line. Whole communities that depend on energy work are watching nervously. The political fallout is spreading too. Conservative MPs from Alberta are digging in behind Smith. Some liberal backbenchers in energy-heavy ridings are getting nervous about supporting Carney. Provinces are recalibrating their own strategies based on how this plays out. Every premier's office in Canada is running scenarios about how this could affect their relationship with Ottawa. None of this happens in isolation. What starts in Edmonton doesn't stay in Edmonton. Constitutional scholars are already calling this a defining moment for Canadian federalism. The division of powers hasn't been seriously re-examined in decades. Now suddenly we might be forced to clarify where Ottawa's authority ends and provincial autonomy begins. That's not just legal esoterics. It determines who controls trillions in resources, who sets environmental standards, who collects tax revenues. The stakes don't get much higher than that in governance. This fight isn't just about oil. It's about who controls Canada's future, Ottawa, or the provinces. A constitutional expert put it bluntly, we're witnessing the most significant challenge to federal authority since 1982. Smith's move forces a real question. Should provinces have final say over their resources? Alberta's Sovereignty Act shows they're done asking permission. Every Canadian has a stake in how this ends. Legal battles will drag on, but the political damage is already done. Markets are jittery, provinces are picking sides, and Ottawa's authority looks weaker by the day. The real fallout? A country questioning its own power structure. Where do you stand? Hit the